Welcome back to Leading the Charge. I'm your host, Brandis P. Bonos. I got a big episode coming up for you guys today. Hope you guys are excited. A lot of crazy things have unfolded in the past couple of days. I'm sure if you guys haven't seen it already, there was an interview with Tucker Carlson and Ted Cruz yesterday. What a disaster it was from the beginning until the end on so many different levels. I mean, this was the blind side of all blind sides. This was the biggest, out of nowhere drone strike in the middle of the night while you're sleeping interview I've ever seen. This was bad. And I want to go into this because this is really fascinating. This is really interesting. So, okay. Ted Cruz is, obviously, he's a senator from Texas, and he's been a senator for several years now. This guy's been a senator, I believe, since 2012. And since then, obviously, he's taken millions of dollars from AIPAC. The number is between, $1 to $2 million? It's somewhere in that range. So he's taken between $1 to $2 million from AIPAC, from the Israel lobby, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. And he goes into this interview with Tucker Carlson, and I'm guessing he's going in and he's thinking it's going to be typical. It's going to be normal, right? You go in there, he might ask you a couple of difficult questions. He'll ask you a difficult question here. He'll ask you a difficult question there. He won't press you on it, right? So he'll ask you, I'm hearing a lot about this regime change stuff, in Iran and, people in the National Security Council, people in the Pentagon, people in the State Department are advocating for a regime change war in Iran. What's that? What's the rationale behind that? And, on the surface, right, it looks like a difficult question. It's like, oh, he's asking him, why are they fighting for regime change in Iran, especially after the disaster in Iraq a couple years ago? And that's probably what Ted Cruz assumed the interview was going to be like, but it was much worse. And this is how you know. Typically, when interviewers want to do this tough questions, this kind of abrasive, assertive, aggressive style of interviews, they press you. They really hold you. They hold your feet to the fire on every single question. They cut you off in the middle of your sentence. They raise their tone. They raise their voice. Or I'm sorry, when they do this aggressive style of interviewing, they'll ask you one difficult question, and then they'll kind of move on and be like, okay, I understand. They'll ask you a difficult question. You got to think about it for a little bit, and then they kind of move on. With Tucker, he was doing all the things I just mentioned. Holding his feet to the fire, asking him difficult follow-up questions, asking him to be technical, challenging his technical, detailed understanding of the conflict, of the things that he's talking about, asking him specifically, how much aid have we given to Israel in the past 2-3 years? How many people live in Iran? What's the ethnic makeup of Iran, right? He's asking him to be specific. He's asking him to be detailed. And even from the outset, he was challenging his understanding of geopolitics and of the United States foreign policy in various parts of the world. He's challenging him on Maduro, if the United States had actually been involved in trying to overthrow the government in Venezuela. He was asking him whether or not Iran was actually behind trying to assassinate Donald Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania last year. And he couldn't come up with any compelling arguments. I think that was probably his strongest case, the whole Iran Donald Trump thing. When he was talking about John Bolton, an attempted killing on somebody who works in the administration, where one of these lower level guys. But Tucker Carlson was pressing him. Tucker Carlson was holding his feet to the fire. And that's not something you ever really see in the media space. A lot of it is just they pretend to ask you these difficult questions and then they move on. And that leaves you wondering, what is Tucker Carlson doing? What is he saying? Why is he asking him such difficult questions? And you ask yourself, Does Carlson maybe have an agenda of his own? Does Carlson maybe, I don't know, maybe there's somebody else who's putting the battery in his back? Because like I said, Tucker Carlson, or I'm sorry, a couple years ago, Tucker Carlson um, was an advocate, or a couple, maybe a couple, more than a couple years ago, several years ago, 2 decades ago, a decade ago, in that area, maybe a little bit more than a decade ago. He was one of these guys who was on national television, talking about Iraq. And, Tucker Carlson was one of these guys who was always behind Trump, always echoing Trump. And since he's left Fox News, he's taken a more aggressive and maybe a bit contrarian and contentious attitude and posture towards people on the, closer to the center right, guys like Ted Cruz and whatnot. But it was really bad for several reasons, this whole interview. I mean, Ted Cruz looked like a weasel throughout the entirety of the interview. He couldn't answer basic questions. He's going on these long diatribes about communism. He's talking about Castro, Batista. He's talking about the USSR, the Soviet Union. He's talking about China. And he's trying to make himself seem patriotic, but every single time he gets asked a question, he brings up communism, because that's like a really easy, cheap talking point that conservatives and Republicans like to go to distract from any questions about Israel. It's always, oh, well, Israel, you want to talk about Israel? Why don't you talk about China? China's really the ones who are behind this. It's the Chinese, it's the Russians, it's the communists. And that rhetorical trick is getting old. It's not effective anymore. I don't really know if it was ever effective, but it's certainly not effective now. You got people like Myron Gaines, Nick Fuentes, Dave Smith, Scott Horton, Jeffrey Sachs, John Mearsheimer, and plenty of other people, Candace Owens, Ian Carroll. You got a lot of people now on the conservative side who are starting to rise, who are starting to grow, and they're starting to expose the neocon nonsense. And you guys have to understand, we're really in a consequential period in human history right now, in American political history. It can't be understated just how much the alternative media space is changing the collective conscience in the Republican and conservative side of the political spectrum. It really can't be overstated, or can't be understated, rather. The Overton window is legitimately moving. It is moving further to the right. And that scares a lot of people who work in legacy media. That scares a lot of people who are in the government. This is the primary reason why. The median viewer for Fox News is 65 years old. 65. These people are ancient. 2 generations older than I am, right? Or really 3 generations when you think about it, because you have millennials, you have Gen X, and then you have baby boomers. So these people are 3 generations older than us, than Gen Z. And that is the primary viewer base of Fox News. People who are 40, people who are 30, and God forbid, 20 and younger are not watching Fox News. The people who are watching Fox News are the people who have pensions, the people who are collecting Social Security checks, the people who stay at home all day, who don't have jobs, retirees, who have nothing better to do than just be spoon-fed Republican talking points on Fox News and worry about China and the left and Democrats and communism all day long. But the people who are really seeking out the truth know that this rhetoric doesn't work anymore. We are not falling for the Fox News talking points because we know Fox's primary objective is manufacturing consent. It's consent manufacturing, it's state media, it's propaganda, and the people who own Fox News have close ties to Israel. We understand this. We know this. All this information has been exposed. And once you open up that Pandora's box, you can't close it again. So the Republican side of the aisle, that's closer to the center, that's more Zionist aligned, is beginning to realize that their old rhetorical tricks are no longer working. And this interview that Carlson just did, that was released yesterday with Ted Cruz, I'm going to move this out of the way, with Ted Cruz, sealed the deal. It sealed the fate, the end of the neoconservative movement in this country. Now, there's still a lot more work to do. You know, we got to clean up the government. We got to deal with the deep state, you know, people who have been working in the Pentagon and the military for 30, 40, 50 years. All these war hawks who are still in the government. All these people in Congress who are still getting handouts from AIPAC, getting handouts from Wall Street, Silicon Valley, and so on and so forth. So there's still a lot more work to do, but the fact that the ideological pipeline is moving further to the right, or at least is moving away from Zionism, is I mean, how consequential that is really cannot be understated. We are grooming the future generation of lawyers, of politicians, of thought leaders in the think tanks, in the institutions and the universities, to not have this allegiance, this fealty to Israel. That is going to have serious ramifications on our foreign policy in the next several years. Mark my words about that. But I want to get more into this interview because this is what's really fascinating. So Ted Cruz, I mean, he got embarrassed. You know, Carlson mopped the floor with him. And this was an ambush from the beginning until the end, just a complete ambush. So there was multiple different things that were particularly interesting in this interview. And there's a couple that I want to touch on. The first thing I want to touch on is this whole AIPAC thing, right? So Tucker Carlson is asking Ted Cruz if he takes money from AIPAC, and he's asking him what AIPAC really is. And Ted Cruz runs down this dialogue tree, and he talks about how AIPAC is this loose organization of individuals. They advocate for a stronger American-Israel relationship, right? And when Tucker presses him on this question, on this line of questioning, he asks him, okay, does AIPAC correspond and work closely to achieve the foreign policy objectives of the Israeli government? And the answer to that question is obviously yes. Because when Tucker Carlson asked him, can you name the last time that AIPAC deviated from a foreign policy objective of the Israeli government, Ted Cruz couldn't find a single instance. He couldn't name a single case where the two groups diverged, where AIPAC and the Ministry of Defense in Israel diverged ideologically on a important foreign policy, geopolitical objective, goal, whatever, strategy. And he exposed him on this badly. Furthermore, when he was asking him about whether or not there are Israeli spies on American soil spying on American citizens, Ted Cruz said, oh, well, of course there is. Of course there's spies on American soil. But we have Canadian spies. We have M16, you know, British spies, French spies, German spies. Everybody spies on us. But none of those groups, none of those countries that I just mentioned are allies. We're not fighting their wars for them. They're not feeding us bad intel to drag us into wars in Eastern Europe, or to go drag us into fighting some other war with some country that they have a problem with, right? Israel obviously is. Israel is the one who fed us bad information in 2003 and in 2002 about whether or not Saddam Hussein had ties to Al-Qaeda, whether or not Saddam Hussein had chemical weapons or biological weapons, weapons of mass destruction. They lied on multiple cases, lobbied to Congress, said we would be welcomed as liberators. They would greet us with flowers. They would be proud, happy, exuberant to see the Marines land in Iraq. And obviously none of that was true. It was a complete disaster. 1 million people dead, radioactive outbreaks, cancer numbers and birth defects skyrocketing in places like Fallujah, where depleted uranium shells were being used. A real humanitarian crisis, a real refugee crisis. It led to the rise of ISIS. It broke the state apart. The Kurds effectively have their own city-state in the northeastern region of the country. They're effectively a separate entity, a separate country. So we broke apart the government. You have ISIS, you have other terrorist groups and militias there, you have the Popular Mobilization Forces, you have the Kurds, and so on and so forth. And then you have the Iraqi government, who can hardly even control all these people. They can hardly even control all these different rebel groups and militias because of the United States going in and destroying the country on behalf of Israel, because Israel wanted us to do that, because Israel gave us bad information, fed us lies to drag us into that war. Last time I checked, Britain didn't do that. Last time I checked, France hasn't done that. Germany hasn't done that. Only Israel has done that. Only Israel gets lump sums at the beginning of each year so that their money can sit in the Federal Reserve or some bank in New York and collect interest more than all of our allies. We don't give them lump sums and let them store that money in a reserve in New York to collect interest on it. Only Israel gets that benefit. Israel is the country that gets cash flow financing. Israel is the country that gets deferred payment programs, where we let them buy 5 years worth of military assets up front, and then we let them pay it off with the aid that we give them every single year. We don't do that with anybody else. With everybody else, we give them aid, and they use that aid to buy goods, to buy weapons, to buy military assets from our defense contractors. But we don't let them defer the payments. We don't let them pay over time. We make them pay when they have the money. And the moment that money runs out, we don't give them aid. Only Israel has that benefit. We allow Israel to conduct business with our defense contractors without going through the USCA, so that they can get better deals, so that they can get expedited shippings on F-14s and F-35s and F-16s. We give them all these benefits. You understand where I'm coming from? We let Israel draw down on grants before making them ever draw down on a loan, so that they don't have to pay interest on that loan until after they're done using all the money from the grant. With other countries, the moment we make them start drawing down from a grant, they have to draw down from a loan at the same time so that we don't lose a penny in interest. These are all the kinds of benefits that we give to Israel that we don't give to anybody else. And then they come to our country, they spy on our citizens, they lie about having a nuclear program, they don't listen or obey when we give them strict rules to abide by on foreign policy. And then they come here and they spy on us, and they do whatever they need to do, I don't know, to gain an upper hand on us, to blackmail us. And Ted Cruz's whole opinion on that is that that's just okay. They blackmail our politicians. They conduct psychological operations here. Their fingerprints were all over 9/11. I mean, with all this information out there, your attitude towards Israel spying on the United States is apathy. How can you defend that? How on God's earth can you defend that? And the question is, well, if he can't defend that, why is he? Why is he defending that? And it's because he can't criticize it, because he's funded by AIPAC. And the moment he starts repeating AIPAC talking points, the moment he strays away from the objectives of AIPAC, that's the moment that he stops receiving funding. And the moment that funding goes towards somebody else who is his competitor, who is his rival. This is what AIPAC does. They do this with every congressional and Senate run. The moment you come out in opposition to Israel is the moment in your next race, rather than funding your campaign and putting millions of dollars behind you, they put it behind your political opposition. Understand this. That's how AIPAC works. They put you in golden handcuffs. Handcuffs made out of metallic, colored, patterned dollar bills. They put these handcuffs around you, these golden diamond bracelets around your hands, and you can't break out of them. That's what they do. And the moment you try, and the moment you do, you slip out of them with lotion, with shea butter, pull your hands out of the handcuffs, they're giving all that money to your political opposition, the person that's running against you in the next election. So you can't speak up, or else you're effectively signing away your position in the government. That's how they leverage our politicians. So when he's confronted about AIPAC, he tenses up, he freezes up, he lies, he can't give a straight answer, and then here's the richest part. Rather than answering the questions that Tucker Carlson asks him directly, he says, well, wait. Why are you so obsessed with Israel? Why don't you talk about any of these other countries? Why is it always Israel? Why Israel? Is it because of the Jews? Do you think Jews are running the government? And that's how you know that the entire facade, that the entire dialogue tree has been chopped. They have no other defense. They have no other refutation. So they have to slander you. They have to say, oh, you're being crazy. Oh, you're worried about the Jews. Oh, you're an anti-Semite. We're tired of it. It's not going to work on us anymore. We're waking up. All of us are waking up. The entire country is waking up. That's why Gen Z's not watching Fox News anymore. They're watching Rogan. Are they watching Rogan? Who are they watching? Well, I'll tell you this. Gen Z is not watching Shapiro. Okay? We're not watching Shapiro. We're not watching Klavan. We're not watching NPR. We're not watching Fox News. We're not watching CBN or, God forbid, TBN, Trinity Broadcasting Network. We're not watching CBS. We're not watching that. We're watching Fuentes. We're watching Dave Smith. We're watching Jeffrey Sachs. We're watching Mearsheimer. That's who we're watching. We're watching Scott Ritter. We're watching Scott Horton. That's who we're watching. We're not watching, we're watching Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and Ian Carroll, like I mentioned earlier, but we're not watching Ben Shapiro or Michael Knowles or Prager or Glenn Beck. That's not who we're watching. You know, and some of us are watching, Charlie Kirk, but we're not watching these mainstream legacy, pillars of the neocon conservative apparatus. We don't care about TPUSA, not really. Or we don't care about all these different college tours that Ben Shapiro is going to. We're not watching Jordan Peterson anymore. Things are changing. You lost. The game is over. Guys like Ted Cruz in a couple years aren't going to be politically viable. It's not going to work. This whole Zionism shtick, it's not going to work. We want populism. We want free trade to end. We want industry to come back to the country. We want to stop fighting everybody's wars in the Middle East. That's what we want here. And you can't convince us or compel us anymore through lies and propaganda that that's what's in our best interest. That's what's in Gen Z's best interest. Fighting wars for Israel is in Gen Z's best interest. You can't square that circle. You cannot do that. That's literally impossible. So, yeah, that was a bad look for Cruz. Horrible look. You're being asked about AIPAC, and you can't even answer straightforward what AIPAC does. You got to talk about communism and Batista, and my parents were tortured by Castro. I'm sorry, sir, we don't care. That's not what we're interested in. We want to know why our taxpayer dollars are going towards a country that has been instigating wars in the Middle East for the better part of 25 years. And here's another funny thing. People in this country, guys like Ted Cruz, talk about Iran being this big, bad boogeyman. But what he won't tell you is that Iran offered to help us fight the Taliban before the Taliban took over Afghanistan in 2021. What he won't tell you is that Iran offered to put their soldiers in Iraq to prevent sectarian violence from blowing up in Iraq during the invasion, and Bush said no. This irrational posture, this irrational, you are the enemy regardless, this weird symbolic defiance, it's not going to work anymore. We see right through it. Iran is trying to negotiate. Iran has extended an olive branch. Iran has been in compliance with the IAEA. Iran has signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Iran allowed 24/7 surveillance and monitoring on their centrifuges at Natanz, at Fordow, at Isfahan, at Bushehr, at Tehran, and various other facilities throughout the entire country. They capped enrichment at 3.67%. They were shipping out their stockpiles to France. And they were having it reprocessed in Russia and having the fuel rods sent back. They weren't violating any of the inspections. It was called an inspection regime. And then you have Israel destroying Sudan, destroying Somalia, destroying Libya, destroying Lebanon, destroying Iraq, destroying what else? Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, right? Syria, and now Iran, spying on American soldiers, spying on American citizens through cyanine. They have a nuclear program that they've lied about. They drove Egypt, they drove Iraq, they drove Syria into the hands of the USSR during the Cold War. They come to Congress and demand that we give them more money. When we tell them don't do something, they do it anyways. When Trump says don't strike Iran, they do it anyways. So if anybody is really an adversary here, wouldn't it be the country that doesn't listen to what we say? The country that goes against what we say, rather than the country that tries to work with us through diplomacy? Please square that circle for me. Please square that circle for me, Mr. Cruz. But you can't because you're paid by AIPAC. And here's another thing. All these propagandists now are coming out of the woodwork and they're telling all of us that Iran is the biggest threat to our national security if they get a nuke. Or if they get 90% highly enriched uranium, weapons-grade uranium, or weapons-grade plutonium. But what they won't tell you is the technical gaps that you need to fulfill before actually acquiring a nuclear weapon, which is a separate conversation entirely. Because here's the big thing. Propagandists from the Israeli government will go on TV, they'll go on news, they'll go on these news panels like Piers Morgan, like this Emily lady today when she was arguing with Scott Horton. This lady doesn't have the first clue what she's talking about. She doesn't know shit. She obviously doesn't know what to say about that, about the propaganda, about the lies. Because we're all kind of sick of it and we can all kind of see right through it. And that's really what was so bad about this interview. What was so scathing and damning about this interview with Ted Cruz and Tucker Carlson. He made him look like a inept buffoon. He made him look like an idiot. The elite, the cream of the crop. You need to understand, these people who live and work in DC who are running the country are graduating from Ivy League schools. They're being groomed from the time they're freshmen, undergrads, to be leaders of think tanks, of foreign policy, of the government, to be politicians. I mean, these people are being groomed to be the leaders of our society. And when Tucker Carlson goes up to you and he asks you questions and you can't give real answers, you only have a dialogue tree, a preloaded script, you look like an idiot. And it's especially embarrassing because you are leading the country. You are one out of only 100 senators in the country. That is abhorrent. Furthermore, when Carlson was asking him about why he was advocating for regime change in Iran, he didn't even know how many people lived in the country. He didn't know how many people lived in the country. He didn't know the ethnic mix of the country, yet he was advocating to overthrow the government. You can't make this up. How are you advocating overthrowing the government of a country, a civilization that has existed for several millennium, that has been repressed for the past 50 years, and you don't even know how many people live in the country? You don't know how many people live in the country, and you don't know the ethnic makeup of the country. That like really is like, that's like really disgusting. Like it's not even just embarrassing, it's like disgusting. It's like you are calling for the overthrow of a government which could lead to a massive refugee, humanitarian, logistical crisis that has severe ramifications on global supply chains, on bordering countries. We're talking about millions of people could potentially die from that, from overthrowing the government, and you don't know how many people live in the country. That's pretty bad. That's pretty bad. Furthermore, he didn't know the ethnic makeup of the country, which is pretty consequential considering everything that happened in Iraq. And if you don't know the ethnic makeup of Iran, it's 60% Persian. You have Arabs living there. It's 10% Kurdish. There's Jews living there. There's Turkmenistans living there. There's Balochis living there. Afghanis living there. Not to mention you have Sunnis living there, right? You have Sunnis, you have Shias, you have Sufis, Christians. So you have many different religions, many different ethnicities in the country, many different ideologies. You have Marxists, you have communists, you have ultra conservative Sharia law Islamists in the country. And you have to think, if the country gets overthrown, if the government gets overthrown and it's a free-for-all and you have to install some kind of provisional government and you have all these different ethnic and religious divides, what do you think is going to happen? What do you think is going to happen? It's going to be the same thing that's happened in all these other countries. The most violent, the most well-armed, the most well-trained, and the biggest, most unempathetic, disempathetic group of people are going to join forces. They're going to kill everybody else. They're going to suppress everybody else, and they're going to rise to the top. That's what's going to happen. And people like Ted Cruz are calling for the overthrow of the government without knowing that that is exactly what it could lead to. And furthermore, people who are talking about this conflict and advocating for regime change, when people say regime change, you need to understand clearly what they're saying. They're not just saying regime change. They're not just saying we're going to go in there and we're going to get rid of a couple people who lead the country and we're going to put some new people in who are more friendly with the West, people who are cool with liberalism, people who like cosmopolitanism, people who are going to allow foreign investment and foreign capital to come into the country. Yeah, that's a really good idea. And everybody's just going to hop on board with it because they love the United States and they love the West and they love free trade. That's not what's going to happen at all. But that's what these people think. That's what guys like Ted Cruz think. And here's what's even worse. I was watching the PBD podcast yesterday, and I was listening to Adam Sosnick. And, you know, this guy, some of the things he says, it's like this guy is really the epitome of like a super ultra Jewish Zionist, right? Like you have Jewish people, regular, normal, cool Jewish people, and then you have like ultra Jewish Zionists. And these kinds of people are the people who are like, you can't have a rational geopolitical conversation with them because they think Israel is always in the right. Israel can do no wrong. Israel is the good guys. Iran's the bad guys. And here's what's so bad, and here's what's so infuriating about listening to guys like this talk. I was watching the PBD podcast yesterday, and he had a couple guys on. He had on Vinny, of course, and then he had on Adam, and then he had on these two other guys. I think a guy named Tim, and then some Mexican guy. But anyways, they were talking about Israel, and they were talking about Iran, and Adam Sosnick starts talking about regime change and how Israel is going to liberate the country and they're going to be free and they're not going to be under the thumb of the oppressive Shia government, the revolutionary government, the Islamic Republic. It's going to be over. They're going to be free. They're going to have free internet. They're going to be able to walk around without having to wear a hijab or a burqa. They're going to bring freedom. They're going to liberate the country. That's what he's saying. And he's saying we're going to go in there and it's going to be a great thing because they have a history of liberalism. We're going to free the country. Really, nigga? Is that really what you think is going to happen? Is that really what anybody thinks is going to happen? When we already have precedent of this? We saw what happened in Iraq. There was a civil war, million people dead. We saw what happened in Lebanon, civil war, hundreds of thousands of people dead. We saw what happened in Syria, humanitarian crisis, 500,000 people dead. Fascist government. And then after the fascist government, a terrorist government, which is even better, takes over the country. Saw what happened in Libya, civil war, slave trades in Tripoli. We saw what happened in Somalia, civil wars. Pirates run the capital of the country. Barbary pirates, or not Barbary pirates, but pirates, Somalian pirates run the country in Somalia. Sudan, civil war, hundreds of thousands of people have died. The Rapid Support Forces and the Armed Sudanese forces have been warring for the past 2 years now. And you're meaning to tell me that there's just going to be a sudden change, or this time it'll be different. This time it's going to be peaceful. This time it's going to go smoothly. Really? 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 People talk about regime change. Guys like Sosnick or Sosnick, however you say his name, guys like Sosnick, guys like, PBD and a lot of these other guys in the conservative space talk about regime change like we're going to go play bowling at Dave & Buster's. Like we're waking up to put on our golf shoes and our visor and our polo to go play golf at the golf course at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Like it's all going to be fine and dandy and smooth sailing. These people, I don't know if they actually believe that, like if that's their actual position, or if they just don't know what the hell they're talking about. But the people advocating for regime change, you need to understand clearly when people say we want regime change, what they say is we want to overthrow the government violently, kill the leaders, kill the foreign ministers, kill the people running the institutions, wipe them all out, replace them with new people who are more friendly to our interests under the assumption that the people who are under the institutions, people who are under the government, the majority of the population are going to pledge their loyalty to this new government that serves the interests of a foreign government that just came in and killed all their leaders. That's what you're saying when you say regime change. But the word regime change, they try to make it sound normative. When it's really all those things that I just told you. Years of violence, years of humanitarian crisis, years of bombing, years of instability, years of trying to rearrange and reconfigure a society that had for 50 years and even longer been intact, been relatively stable. That's what you're talking about doing. And let's be very, very clear here. Do you actually think Israel cares at all about liberating the people of Iran? Because that seems to be a common talking point. They're going to liberate the country. They're tapping into their satellite networks and playing liberation, color revolution style ads on Iranian state TV. They're hacking their system through cyber attacks. They're affecting cable news or satellite news or whatever. They're affecting cable TV to push pro-Israel propaganda. Like they care. Do you actually legitimately think that the state of Israel cares about liberating Iran? Does that sound rational to you? Or do you really think it's probably something more along these lines? They destabilized 3 countries in Africa that were surrounding them. They made peace with Egypt. They made peace with Jordan. Okay? They destabilized Lebanon, destabilized Iraq, destabilized Syria. Now they're trying to make peace with Syria, made peace with all the Gulf states, and the last piece of the puzzle is Iran. So do you think they want to liberate them so that they're more compliant and more willing to trade and negotiate with the West, which wouldn't even be in their interest? Or, more likely, do you think they want to destroy the country, destabilize the country, give their country more of a pretext to keep going with these invasions, keep going with these forever wars, keep taking money from the United States government, keep getting new weapons, keep getting new toys from Palantir and Silicon Valley, keep getting all these augments, open up an opportunity to build the IMEC corridor, to build the Eastern Mediterranean pipeline after weakening the only government, the only country that was capable of challenging them? Do you think that's more likely? Do you think that's probably the reason why they're actually attacking Iran so aggressively and pushing for a war? Or do you think it's because they want to liberate the country from the regime? Really? Really? Come on. Think a little bit. Okay? So you have all these talking points. You have we want to liberate. Regime change. It's going to be great. It's going to be peaceful. They're going to want to do free trade with the West. Right? They chant death to America. Since when do we care about people chanting death to America? People have been chanting death to America in America for hundreds of years. But this country is all about free speech. Until it has anything to do with Israel, then it's no longer free speech. But this country is all about free speech. So why on earth should we care about people exercising that right, even if it's in a foreign government, which actually adds to the argument because they're sovereign. So we're worried about a foreign government saying things. When have we cared about what anybody says? You focus on what people do. And obviously they have a reason to say that. They have a reason to say death to America. They have a reason to chant death to America. And it probably has something to do with the fact that you support all their enemies. You support Israel. And Israel supports ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Same with the United States. They back all these Sunni rebel groups who are opposed to Hezbollah, who are opposed to Shia militias and Shia dominance in Iran. Anything to destabilize that country, even if it means using terrorists who also chant death to America. You think ISIS likes us? You think Al-Qaeda likes us? You think any of these Sunni militant militia fundamentalist groups like us? No. But we have a common enemy, at least recently. So that's the reason why we work with them. That's the reason why we fund them and arm them. Obviously, we do this all through the CIA. Go look at Operation Timber Sycamore. Look at what we did in Syria. Go read about that. Go read all about that. Read all about what the Obama administration was doing in Syria when they were giving arms to groups like al-Nusra, which split off to become HTS, I believe. Go read all about that. When we were backing these Sunni militias, when we were backing the Kurds, when we were backing other people who don't like America very much, we were backing terrorists to fight against Bashar al-Assad because Bashar al-Assad was friends with Iran, was being supported by Iran. And that's probably the reason why they chant death to America. It probably has something to do with that. It's probably not for no reason. But you want to sit up here and talk about, they chant death to America, they chant death to America. Well, yeah, because you've destabilized every single country that surrounds them. You supported their enemies. You overthrew their leader in Syria who was friends with them. You've killed millions of people through drone strikes, through humanitarian crises, through refugee crises, through affecting supply lines, through making cities unlivable, through shelling different villages, through supporting Shia and Sunni militia groups whenever it was more beneficial for you, bombing their capital. And it might have something to do with the fact that they're chanting death to America. Wouldn't you think? Wouldn't you think? Wouldn't you think? You're grabbing them by the lapels and pushing them up against the wall and saying, sign the deal, make a deal. We run you, unconditional surrender. Yeah, when you grab somebody by the neck and squeeze them and say, make a fucking deal. Of course they're not going to like you very much. We all know this. We know how this works. This is not like rocket science. So don't come at me and tell me they're talking about chanting death to America. If you want to talk about why they're chanting death to America, look at all the evil things we've done in the Middle East and in Northern Africa for the better part of 30 years now. Look at our foreign policy. Look at what we were doing in the 80s when we were giving weapons to Saddam Hussein, when we were sending him internal navigation systems for his missiles, when we were sending him chemical and biological agents like anthrax, like West Nile virus, like mustard gas, to build all these different munitions, to use them to test them out on Shias, on Iranians, on Kurds, and killed hundreds of thousands of people from 1980 to 1990, many of them being Iranians. Maybe that has something to do with the reason why they don't like us, because we've been trying to kill them since the 80s. Maybe that's why they chant death to America. Go look up the Donald Regal report from 1994. Read all about it. We were sending Saddam Hussein decontamination units, cryogenic units. We were sending him biohazard suits, internal navigation systems so that they could accurately launch their missiles. We were sending them all kinds of dual-use technology, shit you can't even think of, things we don't even give to Israel. We were giving them West Nile virus, anthrax, mustard gas, agents that could be used to be weaponized in that war. And all of this was being done because we didn't like Islamic fundamentalism leading a country, because we were worried that if that happened, it would be more difficult to work with them, to do business with them. Because Saddam was willing to play ball with us. And we allowed Saddam Hussein to kill hundreds of thousands of Iranians and Shias and Kurds because we didn't like Iran. So that's probably the reason why they chant death to America. If I had to take a stab in the dark. And we knew about it for several decades as well. So don't come to me and talk to me about death, people chanting death to America. Furthermore, how are they going to kill us? Please explain that to me. Their furthest ICBM only goes to about France or Germany or something like that. It doesn't even get to Britain. Their furthest ICBM doesn't even reach Britain, let alone go all the way across the Atlantic Ocean to hit the east coast of the United States, to hit DC. And you're going to talk to me about them being a threat? They're saying death to America. They can't even reach America. So what does it matter? It's like some guy screaming, I'm going to kill you, but he's locked up in prison for 99 years. For he has a life sentence in prison, but he's yelling, death to John from Rikers Island, and you live all the way in California. Are you really going to concern yourself with that? Does that make sense logically? No, obviously not. So this all the rhetoric about this conflict from all these different people, all these surrogates, all these people get paid by Zionists. It's, first it's Elon Levy, which makes sense because Elon Levy worked for the Israeli government. But first you got Elon Levy, then it's Charlie Kirk, then it's Michael Knowles, then it's Ben Shapiro. Now it's this Emily girl. Anybody who's willing to take the bait and get paid off by Zionists will go out here and spew these lies. And then, of course, you got your small percentage of people who actually believe it. That's really the baffling part to me. That's the really particularly baffling part. The people who actually believe it, the people who actually think Iran is a legitimate threat to the United States, those are the people who really just shock me. I'm like, sir, were you born yesterday? Were you born this morning? Because there's no way you believe any of these talking points if you know anything about Iran, anything about the Middle East, anything about the Iraq wars, anything about anything. The CIA operations, the overthrow of the governments. Anyways, my apologies, guys. My camera died. Hence why it's a little bit darker outside. I had to charge it for a couple minutes. And the lighting's changed quite a bit, so my apologies for that. But, that was really it, right? And I don't want to relitigate this, go through this all over again. But look, you got people like Emily, Elon, Adam Sosnick, Patrick Bet-David, Charlie Kirk, Ben Shapiro, all these people who are in the conservative media apparatus, who have been in positions of power and influence and prestige for decades. All of these people are in bed with Zionists, with Israel. Ben Shapiro is best friends with Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister in Israel. PragerU, the CEO of the company, served in the IDF. All right. And I don't know who Patrick Bet-David is associated with, but Adam Sosnick, his co-host, he's Jewish. You have to understand, the people who are arguing for this war have a vested interest in going to war, whether it's making a profit or it's because maybe they're Jewish. I don't know. But the people who are advocating for a war with Iran, for U.S. involvement in Iran, for regime change in Iran, have a vested interest to do so. Nobody in their right mind is advocating for this unless they have a vested interest financially or ethnically, whatever that means, to do so. Please understand that very carefully. But this Ted Cruz interview between Carlson and Cruz is going to turn out, I promise you, mark my words, to be the most consequential, by far, interview of 2025. It's going to wake up hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. Mark my words on that. But that's it for me. That's it for today's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. And look, just to cap this off, with the way things are looking right now, it looks like we're going to go to war. Iran struck an Israeli hospital earlier this morning. Israel has been striking nuclear facilities in Bushehr, Isfahan, has been attacking government and civilian infrastructure all over Tehran. They've been attacking Natanz. They've been attacking Fordow. And I'm sure you guys are already aware of this, but Israel has no way to actually penetrate Fordow to actually attack, to actually make contact with their nuclear facilities underground, because Fordow is located the length of a skyscraper underground. That is how deep underground Fordow is. Not to mention, at the Natanz nuclear complex, they're building another nuclear facility. It's called the NDUF, the Natanz Deep Underground Facility. And over there, they're building advanced centrifuges, IR6s, IR9s, and they are capable of enriching uranium 5 to 10 times faster than the older generation models like the IR3 or the IR1, which is what the vast majority of centrifuges that are enriching uranium currently at the Natanz fuel enrichment plant actually are. So, considering the fact that they're building new infrastructure, and by the way, the Natanz deep underground facility is even deeper underground than the Fordow facility. It's like another 100 feet deeper underground, maybe 200 feet deeper, and they're using more advanced models of the centrifuge. So Israel has no way of penetrating that. And Trump is demanding, he's pounding the table, he's pounding his fists on the desk currently, talking about total surrender. And let's be real here, Trump is not going to budge more after putting increased pressure on Iran. If anything, his requirements for any kind of deal or negotiation are going to be even more strict, even more limited. So, and that's just going to back Iran into a corner. And considering the fact that there's rumors going around that Trump already pulled the rug on Iran once by pretending to negotiate with Iran in good faith, and then doing that to dupe them into dropping their guard so Israel could strike them on the 13th, it's just not a good look. There's no good faith left. The trust is gone. And right now, the diplomats, the delegation that's responsible for, making a deal with the United States, they can't even meet with the United States right now because of Trump's rhetoric and because of all these strikes coming from Israel. So they have to, actually tomorrow, they're meeting in Geneva with the G3, with the UK, with France, with Germany, to try and relay their message to Trump's envoy, or to Trump maybe. So it's looking like a strike. And I mean, we're sending carrier strike groups there. We're sending aircraft carriers, tankers, the whole 9 yards. We've already deployed, I believe, 3. There's one moving across the Mediterranean right now. So we're moving military assets into the region. And I mean, even if we do make a deal, even if Iran agrees not to allow any enrichment on their soil, which would be, let's be real here, that would be suicide. That would literally be suicide. Because Israel has shown absolutely no signs of relenting. They have the initiative, they have the momentum, they have the incentive, especially given the fact that their coalition needs this war in order to stay together. Netanyahu needs this war to not go to jail. And Israel has been building momentum for this for the past 30 years now. I mean, I don't really see any way in which the United States doesn't get sucked into this, considering the fact that they've displayed no ability to restrain Israel, and Israel has displayed no signs of relent. So, and you know what happens. You know, if Israel starts to take casualties, if Israel starts to get fucked up, for lack of better words here, by Iran, I mean, the United States will have no choice but to step in. And like I said, it's like they're damned if they do, damned if they don't. If they sign a deal, they're exposed, they're neutered, they can't defend themselves, and they still might get striked by Iran, or I'm sorry, they still might get striked by the United States, or get striked by Israel. And here's the real hang up here. Iran has said there is no scenario in which they give up enrichment or move their stockpiles of highly enriched uranium out of the country unless there is a guarantee of relieving sanctions and unfreezing assets through Congress. Because with these executive orders, they don't mean anything. You can just get rid of them the moment you want. If something gets passed in the form of a bill through Congress, there's no way of repealing it. There's no way of getting rid of it, or at least it's a lot harder to get rid of, right? And so Iran has made it very clear, if we're going to negotiate, if we're going to limit the amount of centrifuges we have, if we're going to limit research and development on newer generation models, if we're going to ship our highly enriched stockpiles out of the country, if we're going to cap enrichment below 5%, if we're going to allow 24/7 inspections at all of our nuclear facilities, snap inspections on a moment's notice at military facilities, very intrusive inspections, not to mention having to redesign our heavy water reactor at Iraq so that we can't extract plutonium, remove the impurities from the fuel rods to actually have plutonium to use for a nuclear weapon. You're asking them to give up all that, and it's only going to be in the form of an executive order, not even done through Congress. No, there's just no way they agree to that. They'd rather fight. They'd rather go to war. And let's be real here. Iran is obviously aware of the position that they're in, obviously. So, of course, they're going to try and, through back channels, ask Pakistan for support, ask Russia or China, and getting their proxies ready for an all-out battle. Because if shit goes south, and I promise you, if shit goes south tomorrow or at the next meeting and they're not able to strike a deal, it's going to turn into a bloodbath. It's going to turn to chaos. I mean, we're talking Tel Aviv getting striked all throughout the day, every day, flights being canceled, international trade being shut down, refugee crisis, people fleeing Tel Aviv, people fleeing Tehran, all-out war. United States has to step in to prevent casualties. We're talking, I mean, this could get bad. This could get bad. And like I said, Iran is really in a position now where, I mean, let's be real, they're really just better off fighting. Probably better off fighting. They're probably better off just going to war. Because if it gets to a point, well, I don't know about that. I don't know how much Trump will be swayed by domestic concerns, because obviously if this war gets out of hand, it starts spilling over to other countries and supply chains get messed up. I mean, obviously we're looking at a situation where inflation goes crazy, gas prices go crazy. But I don't know how much Trump will be swayed by that. Obviously he has a strong resolve, strong disposition, very disagreeable. But anyways, that's an alternate scenario. The point is, if Iran makes a deal, they get struck anyways, and by Israel. I mean, what's the point? What's the point? Like, without any guarantee that the United States can't restrain Israel, like something enshrined into a bill that confirms that if, like, there's this condition that if Israel strikes Iran throughout the entire duration of this deal, it's a violation of the deal and the deal is off. Unless there is some kind of stipulation in a deal passed by the United States to restrain Israel from any strikes, any military action, there's no way this deal gets done. There's just no way. I mean, we're going to get sucked in. I mean, we were already talking about, Trump was posting on Truth Social talking about assassinating the head of state, talking about assassinating the supreme leader of Iran. Why are you talking like that? Why are you talking like that? So, you know, he it doesn't even seem like he wants to de-escalate the situation. I don't see any way this de-escalates. I don't. You know. I mean, Israel has already flirted with putting boots on the ground and going into Fordo. You know, they want the United States. I mean, it's going to be this whole operation. The United States is going to fly over, drop some bunker busters, bomb the entire facility in several waves, dozens of bombs, and then after the smoke clears, or maybe while the building's on fire or while the building is smoking, having a bunch of Mossad operatives, you know, dive in, go into Fordow and try to, you know, plant explosives and detonate them while the IRGC is there. I mean, this whole thing is just a mess. So I don't know where this leads, but like I said, I mean, I don't see a scenario in which Trump pulls out here. This whole thing, it's always a vortex. It's always a vortex, and the longer you delay backing out, the more you get sucked in. You're getting sucked in without even realizing it. Like I said, we're moving assets over there. We're moving tankers over there. We're helping them shoot down missiles, intercept missiles. I mean, we're moving carrier strike groups. I mean, yeah. And Israel has already destroyed much of Iran's infrastructure. They're blowing up their Boeings, and I forgot what the name of the city was, but yeah, they're blowing up their jets, blowing up their nuclear sites, blowing up their missile facilities. So, I mean, you have to understand, these operations are years in the making. I mean, it's not like they came up with this last week and decided to go for it. No, this has been years in the making. Years in the making. They have dragged out this war in Gaza, this genocide in Gaza, or this mass extermination, mass ethnic cleansing in Gaza, whatever you want to call it, for the better part of 2 years, or for the better part of a year and a half now, with the goal of prolonging that conflict, with the hopes of eventually having this opportunity to go balls to the walls in Iran. So even if the United States somehow strikes a deal, good or bad, I see no way Israel stops. Too much momentum, too much inertia, too much motive. And every time they escalate the conflict, they are rewarded. They're rewarded with more weapons. They're rewarded with more aid. They're rewarded with more support. They're rewarded with more cover. The United States literally rewards anytime Israel escalates. And whenever they do denounce them, it's always this weak denunciation. It's always, Trump and Netanyahu are having a tense relationship. Things are getting real serious. And then like a week later, they're doing like photo shoots at the White House. So I don't know. I see no way the United States avoids getting involved. And, you know, hopefully that doesn't happen. We don't need more wars in the Middle East. We don't need more forever wars. But like I said, these things turn into a vortex and you just get sucked in. But anyways, I'm going to leave it at that. Hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. Sorry about the cuts, by the way. I'm going to work on reducing the amount of cuts that happen in the future. I started the video without even realizing that the camera was half full in terms of battery. But anyways, that's it for today. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please like, please subscribe, share the video, leave a comment, let me know what you think. And with that being said, I'm out.